Hello, and welcome to 10 Very Big Books, a Malazan read-through podcast. With me today on the show is Iskar. Jarak, how are you doing today, buddy?
I'm good. I'm excited for this one.
Yeah, it's a special episode. We just finished our read-through of A Sail, which kind of puts a pin on our discussions of the Malazan Empire miniseries. So we are delighted today to welcome the author of those books, Ian Cameron Esslemont, to the show. Hello, welcome. How are you doing?
Hello. Thanks for inviting me. It's great to be here. It's fantastic to meet you guys.
Yeah, of course. The pleasure's ours.
100%.
So let's hop into it. I would just be curious, you've written these books, of course, you've done some reading. Of course, I don't know. Yeah. When you're reading, when you're watching a movie, when you're watching TV, what makes you think like this is a great story?
Well, I think if it touches my emotions, mostly, I think it really has to reach inside and touch something inside you. And that's what makes it memorable and worthwhile. I think that's the first most important thing, to catch you.
Kind of draw you into it that way. Nice. Just a little interested. So we were talking a bit before we got on the mic about, I asked you had spent some time in Japan, which is where I'm at now. And you were saying you were traveling around Southeast Asia. Were you traveling for work?
Well, I was working. I was teaching English at a university in Bangkok. But whenever I had time off, my wife and I, we would immediately venture forth wherever we could, travel through Cambodia, Laos, and then down Malaysia, Indonesia. And then when we finished up, we went and spent some time in India as well. And then, like I said, I accepted a contract to teach English in Japan.
Do you feel like those experiences influenced your writing?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I had traveled through Central America as well, doing visiting archaeological sites, and I've always enjoyed travel, and I really think it's fantastic. Something anyone should do. And I think that that exposure and sort of trying to soak all that up as best I could really had an influence.
Yeah. Very cool. Yeah, because I wondered, and actually people in the Discord were asking about, like martial arts and stuff, because people who, like the whole Segula stuff, wonder where some of that stuff comes from.
Oh, when I came back to work here in the U.S., my boys got interested in Taekwondo, and so I studied Taekwondo for many years with them. But I'm a bit older, so I slid over to the tradition of Japanese swordsmanship, which is Iaido, which is traditional samurai swordsmanship. And I've done that for a number of years.
Oh, wow. That's epic.
It's not as hard on the joints.
Nice. Did you ever try any kendo too?
No, never kendo. Kendo is, I think it's, it's of course it's much more active and aggressive, and I was more interested by that time I was more interested in the philosophical side of the swordsmanship out of that tradition.
And is that from living in Japan, or that was just appealed to you because your kids are doing jiu-jitsu or yeah?
My reading and my interests before, I was always attracted to that, and I really enjoyed my time in Japan. The aesthetic and all the rest really appeals to me personally.
Now I know, I believe Jakuruku is based on, it's eluding me, I want to say.
Parts of it are sort of a Southeast Asian jungle region, you could call.
Yeah, kind of a vague amalgamation or a type of inspiration.
inspiration, and then another part is more of a step sort of with tribes, more of sort of a horse kind tribes, and there's a mix.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I only ask because, obviously, we just read through these first 6, and they really take place across a variety of different stuff, a lot of different settings, a lot of different types of stories. And I wonder how you kind of decide where you kind of want to go next and what kind of story you want to tackle. How much of it is based on geography? How much of it is based on like the characters? And I'm also curious because I have to imagine there's a commercial element to it. Of course, if you're writing about, the backstory to some character that has been shown before, this thing that's more related, there's more of an appeal, so to speak, than if you just completely went off to a distant continent, So I wonder, how do you kind of balance these things and how you ultimately make that decision?
Well, of course, originally Steve and I had split things up, sort of a list, and he had like 10 or so things that he wanted to do in the world, and I had 10 or so that I said I'd be interested in doing. So, and there was no actual overlap or dispute in those lists. We each had our own interests. And then my coming in later, I pursued that list and went where I thought there were larger holes that could be filled. And we shared each other's characters. We just mixed them up, and I just use who I think is needed for that story, or who is an interesting, amusing character who could show up at that time or might be nearby. We try, to get it right. I'm sure that a couple times we made some missteps, but it's a big project.
Sure, of course.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That's awesome. I love it. What about and I wonder if you have any like kind of connection to the sea or something like that. I wore my High Seas hat today, which is just nothing but it's a local brewery, but like one of the things and it's kind of, I think, universal, is that the ocean, like the sea battles, both I think the stuff in Stonewielder, and I think the whole root stuff with the kind of shooting the straits and all of that in a sail is just some of the most badass stuff. And I wonder if if what the connection is there, or how did you manage to pull off such like epic sea stuff? Because that seems like you got to have some kind of knowledge there.
Well, that's great. I'm glad that you feel that way. It's that's wonderful to hear. In that, mostly from reading and research. I'm a prairie boy, and I guess that's the attraction. If you're attracted to what is exotic to your own upbringing. I grew up in the prairie, and then here I am longing for the coast, and I suppose there are people who live on the coast who just are sick of it and want to get inland. So
yeah.
But the rest of it is reading, research. A lot of I find myself reading mostly nonfiction these days, histories, war histories, campaign histories, and research like that.
Oh, yeah, because that's the stuff I read, and I was like, man, someone needs to like make a movie out of this stuff, because that would be epic. It's just really, really well done, and it seems like a lot of tension and all the good stuff that you go to books for.
Well, I'm glad it worked. That's great.
Either of you ever read any of those Master and Commander books? My friend's like really into them. I think there's like 26 of them, or there's a ton of them, right?
I don't know.
Is that the O'Brien? Is that the?
Yeah, I think so, right?
Yeah. Well, if you want historical detail and facts, I mean, that is certainly a place to go. There's just a ton of research behind those works and historical details. But they are a bit slow, I think, for that reason.
Interesting.
Yeah,
you mentioned you're reading histories. I mean, that's just one of those things. There's a huge also realm of historical fiction. Do you have any interest in that type of stuff?
Yeah, some. When I was younger, I read a lot more historical fiction. But now I'm a little bit less patient. I'm finding.
What do you mean? What do you mean by that?
Well, not necessarily inaccuracies, but authorial artistic license, let's say, sort of, and some authors perhaps injecting a little bit of historical revisionism, and so I sort of prefer to skip that and go more straight to actual firsthand accounts, memoirs, that sort of thing.
Interesting.
That's really interesting. Yeah, and I don't know, Pete, if you mind if I jump in, but that's like it kind of touches on one of the areas.
That's what I was gonna do. Nice, do it.
Okay, yeah, no, because pulling back the veil, I think it feels like that's like a thing, that runs through your books, because you have some like familiarity with some of these characters and things like that, and it's always kind of like almost kind of calling BS or really peeling back the curtain on here's like and the events that like I'm thinking about Path to Ascendancy, and I don't mean to, but I think even in like Knight of Knives and things like that, where it's like the actuality of these like myth, things that have grown to kind of mythological status played out differently than the kind of common conception. And I just felt like that was kind of, maybe you were channeling some of that, what you were just talking about in there throughout the book, all of the books.
All the books. It's always, we're definitely calling into question the accepted wisdom and also perspective. Every character has their own view of the events, and one's account would differ from anyone else's account who may have been present in the very same events, and that's just normal human nature. And I don't think should be a search for truth. I think it should be a search for personal, what you found in that moment, and what you took out of that moment. Each individual.
Yeah. No, I love that. I love it because it's fascinating to see, all the kind of, because I think, even not just Knight of Knives, which is, that was like kind of a defining thing in the Book of the Fallen, is like that's what set off a lot of the, kind of internal stuff and whatever. But I think all the way through, like you're doing it with a lot of different characters. I love the Master Golan and the bookkeeper guy who's like going along in Blood and Bone, and the journal of the ever victorious army and all that stuff, and kind of like you kind of see firsthand how they're massaging it all and whatever and making it into.
Yeah, and I hope this will help the reader sort of cast a more skeptical eye on accepted histories and accepted versions. Especially when the authors have perhaps something to hide or something to convey, and they're trying to sort of make themselves look better, perhaps. And we always need to be skeptical readers. I think.
Yeah.
So as not to be deceived. What I wanted to ask was to link onto this subject about Knight of Knives, which I think is, it's this kind of shorter one. But my understanding is that you had written Return of the Crimson Guard before this.
Both Knight of Knives and Crimson Guard were written way back. But I think maybe Return was finished, or a version of it was finished before Knight of Knives. I think, that could be the case, but both of them were done way back in the 80s. And have, if we looked at them now, they'd be almost unrecognizable, very, very different, because we've changed things since then. But yeah, those were the earliest completed manuscripts. And then we did some screenplays too, Steve and I.
I recall. I mean, wasn't Gardens of the Moon originally a screenplay the two of you guys wrote?
Yeah, we did it as a screenplay after we gamed it, and then so the first written version of it out of the game was a screenplay.
Now, what kind of draws you from going to writing screenplays to writing novels? I mean, they're such different mediums. Both of us were more interested in novelization, and we did the screenplay more as a shortcut. And we whipped through them pretty fast, and then we pitched them, actually, and we were hoping maybe that would be our route, and it would be a quicker route than sitting down and spending a year on a novel that may or may not get accepted anywhere. So. Sure.
Do you still have those kicking around, or are you still happy with them? Are we ever going to see that happen?
Oh my goodness, no! They're they're in shoeboxes. They're early attempts. Maybe Steve. I think we both have versions of them, and sometimes when we're together, we talk about things. And of course, just like our books, we disagree. You see it, and he'll say something, and I'll say, "No, that's not what happened." And he'll say, "Yes, I remember it." So we are constantly trying to figure out, wait a minute, now what did happen? And
do you have a background in movies or anything like that, or where does the screenplay thing come in? Because I always felt like reading your books that it felt very I don't know, whatever the word,
cinematic.
Yeah, cinematic, totally.
Certainly cinematic. I think that's just my style. I have a cinematic style.
Yeah.
Every author has their own style. We all write differently. And have our strengths and weaknesses, and I think mine maybe is it is cinematic, and that can sometimes be construed as a bit of a weakness, because then you can fall into the habit of doing too much visualization and not enough internalization. So you really have to watch how you're apportioning your time on the page. But also, I studied writing, and part of the writing you study screenplays and format and that kind of thing. You read some and you get a feel for it as a genre, because it really is a very separate genre. I mean, just because you can write a novel doesn't mean you can write a screenplay.
Yeah, and then screenplays or even end up different than the movies. That if they're essentially two different things entirely. So
yeah, and they should be different, because they're serving a different media.
Definitely,
they're serving the screen, right? And that's a different art form.
Yeah.
So it shouldn't be identical to the print.
Yeah. No,
you got a movie you love? What's a movie you love?
A movie that I love. Well, I'm a child of the 80s, and I'm getting on a bit. I love Blade Runner.
Great movie.
I still do. I really admire that film because it raises so many questions, deep questions about human nature. What makes you human, and what is human, and those are all just wonderful questions. And so that film really spoke to me.
Did you read that Philip K. Dick story? Actually, I've never read that one.
Oh yeah. Do androids dream of electric sheep? There's a lot of ecological stuff in the novel that didn't get
interesting
into film, but that just would have slowed the film down.
Yeah, I could see how it's time to eschew that if you're, interesting.
Yeah, the philosophical stuff is huge. That's one of the things I think really shines in the whole stone wielder thing, but on both sides actually. But I love the stuff at the end with the whole storm guard and just kind of realize the and actually kind of ties in with the Talon Imath stuff, which is kind of a through line, I think, of the books too. And just these, it's like they're hyper committed, and they're there's honorable people on all these things, even like the Segula and Orb Scepter throne. They're super honorable and good and whatever, and admirable, and and they're fighting for these crazy causes and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Well, I hope that what Steve and I wanted to do is if we had contending parties or races that are introduced, we try and do them full justice and give them just as much fleshing out and roundness as any sort of main character or main contender in a conflict. And so both sides have their reasons for what they're doing, and they deserve the full attention. And of course, another through line for the world is that grayness, the moral grayness. There's no complete right or wrong. It's shades of gray. At least that's what I hope we're getting across.
that's what and I have no philosophy background. For me, it was like, yeah, what does it mean to be a good person? It's like Jan, you know, in Orbs Up Your Throat, it's like that guy is the dude. He's like, dude, you know what I mean? It's like that's who you would love to have like a son, somebody to do, you know what I mean? That's just like epic. But then it's like the underlying, you know, and he's kind of got the wool. And so I just love that whole thing. And I think you see this the Stormguard thing, even the whole, you know, Malazan side of that whole conflict in Stonewielder too. I think that was really, really well done. So I appreciated the philosophy as a total newbie.
Well, for us, we hope that, you know, we see people in crisis, people who are in being tested, and it's the, you know, this the test that reveals the character, you know, and so some react one way and some react the other way, and it's that's the test of crisis.
Totally.
Yeah.
What does it mean to be a good person? Awesome stuff.
Yeah, I mean, when you're tested, your virtues and values really show themselves ultimately when you have to make those decisions. And I'm speaking on this. I mean, I really think when you're talking about virtues and values reflected through these series, I mean, the way, if we talk about the Book of the Fallen, in those 10 books, I mean, ultimately, they're painting a type of values through a type of continuity they have, and kind of more of a statements being made in the later books, especially in the end, right? And I just wonder, I mean, you know, they're like loosely connected, but also pretty connected. And I wonder how much you thought to try and make a statement as a united 6 with these 6 books, or if you were trying to have them more separated. How much were you trying to have a continuity between them, and how important that is for you when you're thinking about writing multiple books that are connected?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. These 6 aren't as much as a connected follow through, say, as Steve's 10.
Sure, definitely.
They're certainly more disparate in place and character. But what I hope is that what comes through is that the same philosophical issues are being looked at again and again and again.
Definitely.
Questions of loyalty, questions of betrayal, and things like friendship and other themes that are sort of being examined through different lenses in different books. And I hope that that's a continuity that comes through right through to a sale at the end.
Lanastog definitely tops it off as one of the epic villains for me. So that no, but I think, you know, I think if you like, and I'm curious, just kind of going off Pete's thing, because, you know, it seems to me like Knight of Knives is really going to be like the end ultimately maybe of like the Path to Ascendancy stuff, but the whole Crimson Guard really does run through, you know what I mean, Return of the Crimson Guard through Assail. And I love the parallel there with the Talon Imass and the whole Lanastog, you know, kind of stuff. But just in general, it's like they're basically redoing the same, you know, and it's really tragic when you find it out.
Yeah, well, and so from the question being, you know, about that continuity, and it's true, they're a main thread, but it's not the books of the Crimson Guard, right?
Totally.
And so they show up and they're important, but the reason that we're sort of I remember people have raised the question about, well, it's the books of the Malazan Empire, but we're not following the Malazan Empire. What's going on? So, for example, it's more, that's the sort of the name for the period. So if you think about, say, the Roman age or the Victorian,
totally.
It's a you know, a political entity that's lent its name to that period.
Yeah.
So these tales come out of that period, and one of the entities being examined is the Empire itself, but also its enemy. Its avowed enemy, the Crimson Guard.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you talk about powers as large as empires and you know, forces, these types of structures, I mean, they have their influences are outside of themselves, you know. I mean, these are immensely powerful things. So, you know, it's not like that the Crimson Guard in some ways defined against is an oppositional group, right? It's defined against them. So in a way, they are still kind of defined by the Malazan Empire in a sense. So I mean, I think it's like, it's kind of, I feel like misreading it too. I mean, I think these books are talking about the Malazan Empire, but maybe not talking about, you know, the Malazans themselves, but that's still, it would kind of be short-sighted, I feel, to ignore the influence of an empire or colonization or these, I mean, these structures are huge and have influences all over the world, you know? So to limit it to, I think, to the, like, the empire itself, I think is probably the wrong lens, right?
I think so too. It would be very inward looking. And limiting to do that. When I was in school growing up, and I'm showing my age again here, but in the history class, it was just a list of kings. You know, your history was just a list of rulers, and that's all it was. And it was dry as dust. You know, there was no life to it, and so that's definitely something I think that Steve and I wanted to avoid completely.
Yeah. No. I mean, it's a whole other, that's a whole other subject. In fact, I was just studying some Japanese history the other day, and you know, some part, it's such a different contrast, you know, coming from America, which, you know, of course there's a large focus on the presidents, you know, in the way contemporary American history is taught. But it's not like there's this list of every emperor of Japan for the last whatever, and we're talking about this. I mean, yeah, it's just a totally different insight. It's always interesting not only to study other places' history, but also to think about how other people are thinking about history on that other level, you know?
Yeah, and for me, I like it.
But from a Western point of view. Oh, sorry.
No, absolutely. No, I think that's what's great is that you kind of zoom it out and you get to see. And I think that's one of the fascinating things about the Crimson Guard is like after Return of the Crimson Guard, they're kind of like, we kind of already did this vow. So that's already that, you know, toothpaste is out of the tube or whatever, but they're not really in conflict. So then it's like, you know, what now what or whatever. And just the whole, consequences of that.
Yeah, there's lots of other events that are sort of alluded to, you know, like the invasion of Stratum or other things that we could always do. But we, at least I and Steve, I'm sure, chose what we did because we thought that it suited a particular theme or story that we wanted to tell. So we chose our historical periods and settings with an eye to that. So I don't think that it wasn't the reverse. It wasn't that, oh, well, here's a gap and I'll just fill it with something.
I mean, I think that's the right call, ultimately. Obviously, if there's like a reason or there's some interesting story you think to be told through like the invasion of Stratum, right? One of these like classic things we all know, you know, then it's like, of course, it's probably good to go there, you know? But I think if you're going there for the sake of going there, you know, maybe that's, you know, I don't know. That's not, sounds like a pitfall.
Not adequate, perhaps.
Yeah, I don't know. But then again, it can be fun. So I'm not really trying to throw water, you know.
That's true too. I mean, it can be done well.
Yeah, and maybe having a little fun's all right. So
yeah,
it was.
Well, yeah. I hope that ultimately at the very top, the readers are having fun. You know, that's how you keep them. And you know, there's no finger wagging from us, and you know, you have to read this or that. We just want to draw the reader along with the plot and story, and have it be entertaining and intriguing. And then, as long as you've got that established, that level, then you can work underneath that in the subtext. If you choose. If you choose.
Try and draw them in emotionally, engage them emotionally, if you will.
Yes. Try to.
What, like you mentioned before, I totally rudely interrupted you and cut you off, but you were starting to talk about like non-Western perspectives, and that I think like we have a best duos channel in our Discord, and one of the best duos I gotta throw out is Merc and Sour, and it kind of gets it, you know, because they're a nice contrast to you know, that non-Western thing, because you kind of have like Merc, who's, you know, and then Sour totally gets into it, and he's like doing all the stuff, and he totally, you know, and that whole setting too of Jakuruku and the forest and Southeast Asia and all that stuff is like, I don't know, can you talk about that, because those are a killer duo that I think kind of embody some of all that stuff that you're talking about.
Well, yes, you know, one of them makes the leap into making cultural adjustments, and is adoptive, and is seeking out the truth of the jungle and the local environment that he finds himself in, and he sees people prospering there and living there, and how are they doing it? So he looks into that and values their wisdom and values their history, and adopts it.
So cool. Yeah, and then like by the end, Merc's like totally like, trashing him for it, making fun of him, and he's this idiot, and then it's like the whole like army's going for it, and I love that like renegade, like, whatever, like, they've been outmoded or whatever from the Malazans, and they link out and they're like, dude, oh my god, this guy like knows, and then everybody's like falling asleep. He's like, what the hell is like going on? And he finally like gets it eventually.
Mm-hmm. There's so many lessons historically, especially in the Arctic. You have expeditions that are stranded in the north and refuse to adapt to the ways of the Inuit, and freeze to death. And if only they had just relinquished their ship, or and been willing to let go of their traditions. It's hard though. It's very hard to change like that, because you come in with your own biases. You think you're always the best, naturally, and these other ways are inferior. The thinking used to be the thinking, and I hope. So it's hard to make that jump. And in the duo, I think it's Sours. Merc's like fighting it all, or is it? I forget which one.
Yeah, Merc's like the one who's trash and Sour for getting into it.
Yeah, he's fighting it all the way.
No, it's funny. I forget. I mixed that up sometimes too. But no, I mean, I think it's like I think you're dead on. I mean, you're talking about power, right? And your ability to like acknowledge not only that these people in some way in this scenario have more power than you, and kind of being willing to let yourself be less powerful and find wisdom and value their culture. It's ultimately kind of about respect.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because he's a mage, right? So he's used to being the one with the power, and that's why Merc's like, dude, I'm supposed to be the G, the one who, and then he's like, it's kind of like a surrendering. It's like a big, leap of faith.
Yeah, I mean, it's always difficult to admit you're wrong or to open up and become vulnerable.
Yeah,
that's always difficult.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's like a comment on the environment too, right? And just how powerful all like that Mother Nature and stuff is too. That you're like kind of not the master of the domain and all that.
It's a very environmental book.
In that sense, like Himatan is very powerful as an organic whole, and those who respect that are prospering within it.
Yeah. Rogue side question. I know since we're talking, we're so related in this realm, I guess, but the Stone Wielder, I hear there's some inspiration from the Imperial Treasures of Japan. Confirm, deny, true, false?
Oh, that's interesting. I'm not sure. What's the inspiration?
Well, I had read about the different parts of the different chain parts of it. I this is weird though, because I had read this somewhere. This wasn't my opinion. I thought this was like a confirmed inspiration,
It doesn't ring a bell. I mean, I may have forgotten, but it doesn't come to mind.
Interesting. Well, there we go. Solve that one, I guess.
Who knows? Maybe I'm wrong.
And I don't know. Seems like you're authoritative on what inspired you about it.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Very interesting.
I do seem to have a thing about weapons, though. I've come up with far more magical weapons, I think, than Steve has.
But magical weapons are great. So I mean, in my mind, the more the merrier.
Yeah, I'm here for it. Yeah. Are we ever gonna see more like Kyle and Jessus, like a little buddy cop series where they're out tearing it up?
Moving on in the future, I don't know. Interesting idea. You have to see where they might be and where I am in the timeline.
Yeah.
For my future projects. Knock on wood, as they say, we get to them.
Are you aware? I don't know if you even or what your thoughts are, but there's like there's somewhat of a controversy, which I personally am surprised on, but like people are debating who Jethus ultimately is. Does that surprise you or?
No, I'm not surprised. That was a difficult one. And in the game, when we gamed that character arc,
Yeah,
that was Rick. That was Anomander.
wow.
Originally.
Wow.
Originally.
Yeah. Yes.
This is a bombshell, people.
So I ran the game, and he was very powerful by this point. Too powerful, frankly. And he kept breaking his weapons and destroying them because he was so strong. And then I told him that there's this race called the Furkrul who they say could make anything, could make something indestructible. And so he goes to find them, and he says, "Make me a weapon that's worthy of me, that I can't break." And so they look at him and they say, "Well, do you really want to do that?" Because the price is very high. He says, "Yes." So yeah, they take him and they cut his arm off and use his bones to make his sword.
Gosh.
And then, though, as years went on, Steve, in his series, went with Rick, and then in the very end, with his death in the books, being as important a sacrifice as it was, that we talked about, we didn't want to cheapen that. We didn't want him to. We didn't want him to pop back up and say, "Oh, I'm back." That would really be a disservice to the depth of that moment. It would cheapen that emotional moment. And also the series has come under some fire, I understand, because we don't have a really distinct line between life and death. We have lots of characters straddling that, and so we didn't want to abuse that either.
Yeah. I'm so excited to hear that, because it is, what I thought too, and also the reason why I thought it wasn't that, but you just gave a lot of ammo to the people who, were ride or die for that originally. So that's a bombshell.
Well, we're trying to respect the moments that we're creating, and so after those books, we talked it over and decided that it would be more proper if we didn't go that route.
Yeah. So it kind of makes sense, because ultimately it's not him, but you're kind of like nodding to it in a way. You're like paying homage in a sense.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah.
And the ultimate face palm getting that sword too, because he's like, "Yeah, totally. Give me one that's worthy of me." And then you, after the fact. Ugh.
Yeah. Well, you asked for it.
It's interesting you mentioned this. I had a few questions written down I want to ask you about it. So when you and Steve were playing, was it like 50-50 you guys running the games versus playing it? Where like how often were you in the pilot seat, so to speak?
He hadn't gamed. I introduced gaming to him.
Oh, so really, if you think about it,
you were all the way.
This is all on you.
Yeah, so I was GMing at the beginning, mostly, almost always. Like all the high power stuff with Rig and Cirque and Lady Envy and Terris and all the rest. Those were mostly my games. But then as time passed, he picked up more and more, and then started running more and more. And by the end, I think he was running more than I was, because he had started the Malazan campaign. And, my character was Wu, or Kellen. So he was running those.
So how did you get into the hobby then?
I found it in high school. I found D&D books, and I was a voracious fantasy reader, and I just had tons of it. And I saw, here's a way I can, live it, so to speak.
Sure.
And the first groups I was with, it was sort of, it wasn't very satisfactory. It didn't really gel. It didn't take off. But then by the time I started University of Manitoba, there was a gaming club there. And these guys were great. And we really had a great gang of gamers there, and it really took off.
Wow. Do you still play nowadays?
No, not anymore. I'm sadly, I'm writing, and it's hard to pull a gang together up here in Alaska.
What takes you to Alaska? Is that family, or what? What's the connection there?
Oh, well, work. I was up here doing my master's in creative writing met my wife, and we went off and traveled and worked, and then a job opening came up here. And both of us enjoyed it. Like, I know people come up here and they don't like it. It's it's just not for them. The dark, the cold. And fair enough. It's just not for you. But we both enjoyed it, so we were willing to come back. And that was almost one of the requirements, I think, for the job. They didn't want someone who, after 2 months, would just run screaming. And so she got the job at the university here in the English department. And so we packed up and drove the Elcan back up north.
Wow. And where are you from originally then? Prairie, you say?
Yeah, Winnipeg. Winnipeg, Manitoba. And I met Steve in the archaeology program there.
But you got a master's in creative writing?
Yeah. I'm overeducated. It's
nice.
That's funny.
Not the worst crime there is.
Yeah.
No, it's a good way to spend your time, as long as you soak it up, and because
don't
really
lose your mind.
Yeah, it's about. I think it's about fulfillment, self-fulfillment. I don't like to see education framed as a career path, like a way to make more money. I think it's more about becoming a more literate person, and a person better able to appreciate the cultural heritage that they have, and make better choices. I would hope.
Yeah,
it's a good on its own right. That's all it is,
Yes, I think so.
Yeah,
I don't like to see it being framed as some kind of income earner or something.
Totally.
No,
it's getting hijacked because they're charging you hundreds of thousands of dollars to make that happen now.
At certain schools, yes, but the state system I think is perfectly valid.
Public education, let's get it.
Nice.
Yeah.
Something to link back to some of this role playing, I was curious. So, you were talking about running these high level games. Obviously, you played Kellen Ved. I wonder if there are any other classic characters. I know you played Caladan Brood. I would love to know other characters you loved playing, or any special character you have in your mind.
I don't know if Steve remembers it the same way I do, but I remember that Whiskey Jack was my favorite character.
Interesting.
And I really enjoyed him down at the squad level, because he was just a grunt to begin with. And with him was my other character at the time, whose name was Wolverine. And when
really
we
good.
finally got these books accepted, Bantam came back to us and said, we've got this list of names that you can't use because of certain copyright reasons. You can't have this character named Wolverine or anymore. I think it was Wolverine. It was something like that. So he became Hedge. As we all know him now, the partner of Fiddler. So that grouping was a lot of fun.
And speaking of Fiddler and Hedge, just to throw in for the haters who say there's no real meaning to death and all of that stuff, tell that to Fiddler and Hedge. That's brutal. Come on, they're it's not the same kind. You don't just go back to being buddies and all that stuff.
And you don't come back the same either.
Yeah, and I think that's why I find that criticism fairly hollow. I mean, it's if you look at characters who return, which there are plenty, and I do think maybe you can make that argument in a sense. It's not like they come back and they're back to being a big part of the plot. You know what I mean? You know, it's like usually they come back and they're kind of around, and you know, I don't know.
They're still
And
lost,
maybe,
dude. Read those with a dry eye. Come on, tell me that.
and damaged, you know,
Yeah.
for because of the events.
No.
Totally. Yeah.
Anyhow.
So haters gonna hate. Forget them.
Haters are gonna hate.
They'll find a way.
Yeah.
Oh.
What about the Azathanite? Because that, like, well, I don't know. Maybe I'll ask it a different way. But what if you just had like there was no considerations or anything? What would be the thing that you'd write about if there was no? You don't have to worry about how many books you sold or whatever. Like, what's just the super fun thing that you'd go nuts exploring if you could?
I don't know, because I feel that I am doing that. You know,
yeah. Awesome.
Commercial consideration hasn't been very high on either of our lists, Steve and I. You know, we just do what we want.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. I think I can say that.
Awesome.
I don't really
it's working
think
for me.
Yeah, I don't think about, you know, I don't know, numbers, sales, that it's irrelevant.
But I'm just so curious. I mean, I don't mean to pry, but is someone coming to you like, can you write about the stratum, and like, can you write about these things that ostensibly would be more commercial? Or is this just, you know, you're just off in your thing and you're going to show up and be like, I wrote 200,000 words about this. This is what I did, you know, boom.
Well, you know, I am answerable to my publisher, so
of course
I will send them outline of a project, and if they like it, they'll greenlight it. And so, but you know, I'll just send them what I want to do, and I'll say, this is what I want to do with these books. And so far, they've okayed everything.
So that's great.
I love it.
Not once have they said, I don't know about that. But also, the person who's always after me is Steve. She's
He's like, write about this.
I want to see that.
Well, I want to throw one out too, because I want to see more like Rillish. I love the idea of him like not getting the redemption in Stonewielder, and then he kind of like does the homecoming. I could see him like being an old man trying to like chill and be, you know, I'm done with all that stuff. I don't know. He's just an amazing, awesome character.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Who knows?
So you I know you're kind of joking there, but how much is, when you're talking with C, I mean, you talk about breaking up this bullet point list. How much is there actually this coordination or like talk of like, hey, like I'm going to address Lacine stuff in these books. I'm going to address, you know, what's going to, you know, I'm going to address Silver Fox in these books. Like, how much is this actually part of that collaboration, or is this kind of just, you wanted to tell a story about the Talani Mass and the Jagat, and you knew Silver Fox was on the table, so to speak, so you kind of put her on to the playing field?
Yes, coordination and consulting back and forth, that sort of thing. Well, you'll be, I don't know, maybe terrified to hear that there's scarily little.
No, that I'm honestly not surprised, you know?
Yeah. I'll just email him and say, you know, I want to pick up with Silver Fox, and he'll say, okay. And then he'll email me and he'll say, where's Orlon? Like, where did you leave him? And I'll say, oh, he's on the continent with the Rujistan. And I say, oh, okay.
Interesting.
Love it.
That's about it. Although we talk about the projects, you know, in more like, well, what I'm happy with this. This is going well, but I'm not sure about this part. And you know, we'll just gab.
Yeah, but gab as like friends and authors, not as like, well, what is good? What is good? You know, checking, you know, lore or whatever.
Yeah, we're. I mean, it's kind of late by now to have trust issues. Too much water under the bridge here.
100%.
Do what he wants, and we'll do what I want. And I think I hope anyway that it shows that they while there are differences in the particulars, the essence of the world, the thematics, all still, you know, fit together.
100%. I showed Peter my PS Publishing a sale. It's somewhere, it's all blurred out, but it's right there. But I'm curious, like, I know there like is a thirst for like just killer books. Are you gonna do some like kind of, or is there any possibility for more reprints or something, or do something with sub press, or do something cool with hardbacks or something for people, or like merch or something? Like, people want to wear t-shirt, you know what I mean? People want like little Segula dolls and stuff. Is there any hope of that in our future?
Well, I would love that. I mean, reprints would be great. I haven't been contacted, but I'd be open to it. Certainly. And merch and things like that. We do get approached through our agent, gaming companies, other production companies have approached us and said, we want to do a RPG, right, based in the world, which would make perfect sense. And they've pitched it to us. A number of companies have. But it wasn't right, or else they see the scope of the project and they go, whoa, that's too much for us. And they'll sort of go elsewhere.
Yeah, I'm really curious about that because, right now, when you look at tabletop gaming, I mean, it's just a huge boom. I mean, it's so popular right now and all these different things. And I'm just curious about what type of values you think about when you're trying to make those types of decisions. Because obviously, as you say, there is like let's make a big budget TV adaptation of Malazan. There's like there's a lot that you would have to address. I mean, there's a ton of things easier to make a forum post about than to do, but like, let's make a campaign setting book for Genabacchus where, people who are hobbyists can enjoy this thing that's like pretty aligned, I do see there's more of a fit there. And I wonder when these people are approaching about these projects, what type of values you're looking for in those things. That seems, I'm curious about that.
A number of years ago, Steve and I were approached by a company who shall remain nameless to do a computer game, computer RPG. And we spoke, and Steve and I, our vision was that it would have to be a massive multiplayer sort of thing, like huge
open world.
Yeah, that for us, that would be Malaz.
Yeah,
sort of like Skyrim.
Yeah,
that sort of thing.
Oh my god!
But they wanted to do a first-person slasher type thing, a first-person swordsman game, and we said no, we just don't. No, we don't see that. So we had to turn them down.
Interesting.
Yeah. No, that could, like the Assassin's Creed where you just run like 50 miles and it's just all these different worlds. Yeah. I'm into that.
And
like,
then,
even t-shirt, you need someone who's just really good at the internet and just like puts up cool stuff, or call the phone upon, like
maybe so.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we also, Steve and I, thought that, like you said, Peter, a good opening would be, say, a game, tabletop RPG set in just on the Malaz Island.
Sure. Just take a slice of the world.
Start there, and you're like a first level character, and you meet all the persons, and you get in, awesome. A couple of minor adventures, and you slowly sort of, grow out from there in modules. That type of thing.
Yeah.
But I don't know. No one bit. So
interesting.
I hope someone sees this and calls you immediately. We need that. We desperately need that.
I'm a fan of the genre, obviously. Tabletop game.
That seems to me like much more like a thing people, I don't know, like tabletop is huge. People do it all the,
that's a slam dunk. They just opened one in town.
That seems to me like a slam dunk. TV shows are a whole other kettle of fish. I know that's been talked about
years
before,
of development.
Exactly, and that's like money and all this. Anyway,
we'll get our hooks into them somehow.
We'll manifest the tabletop setting,
totally. 100%.
Iskar, do you ever tabletop stuff? I don't know that about you.
No, I don't. No. I'm old. I have young kids, so I'm pretty much spreadsheets and diapers and all that.
Nice.
What about the next couple? Because I know you're already on the hook for some more stuff, right? And that's going to close up the gap timeline.
I read Jhistal's 4, and then you'll do 5, 6, and that'll be all part of Path to Ascendancy.
Yeah, yeah. It's sort of the next books are following along from the end of the third, time wise, but they're not telling the same stories. They're telling different stories. So I know a lot of people are invested in Kellenbed and Dancer, and they want to see more focused on them. But now, there's so many ways and ways and paths to pursue an ascendancy, and there's so many people trying to do that these other books will look at other people's journeys and other paths to ascendancy.
I love it. And they're all kind of under that umbrella, though. Yeah.
And history-wise, yes, we're on track and time-wise to sort of still prior to Garden's events and sort of working up towards that period.
Oh my God.
Kind of like what you're saying, Iskar, kind of building towards Knight of Knives.
Yeah. Very provocative title, too. Everybody's thirsting, I can tell you personally.
Right. On that, I can fill in some info here. Bantam isn't, the editors aren't all that sold on the title.
Oh my God.
Oh,
that's like the juiciest part of the whole thing.
I do get though that if you don't know what it is like a
inside baseball. Yeah,
that's their problem, and they're saying that it's too inside, and it's not. It doesn't give a direction for someone who just looks at it on the shelf.
Yeah,
they have no idea of where it's going as a novel. And so I said, okay, I agree with that. I'll accept that. And so we kicked around a couple of alternative titles, and so Jhistal is the working title, but it looks like it's going to come out under Forge of the High Mage.
Whoa! Boom! We got all the exclusives on this show. Boom!
I love it. Oh my God, I'm so excited.
So there's your big.
Bam.
Big path there.
Forge of the
Forge of the High Mage.
Forge of the High Mage.
Whoa. Yes. Oh, the vibes. Very excited.
Interesting. Thank you for that. I will be curious though, is there more of a clarification? I thought the book was going to come out last year, but obviously.
Yeah. Well, COVID and everything else, it got pushed back, and I'm probably the one to blame. I just fell behind. It was difficult. I found it difficult to do justice to the project, and so it slowed down. But now they have it. It's done, and they're all dusted.
Exciting. The excitement is at a very high level. So.
No, I kind of assumed it was the global pandemic that.
I thought maybe that might have something to do with it.
Yeah, I mean, it seemed like a safe assumption. I don't know. It was going on.
Very noble to not. You could have just easily thrown that one under the bus on the pandemic.
That's right. Could have blamed anything.
Yeah, exactly. Nobody would have known.
All-purpose excuse.
We call that walking the talk, I guess. Would love it.
I'm curious. So, obviously Steve has branched out, written some other stuff. Would you ever curious in branching out, write in something in sci-fi, write in a historical, I don't know, write in whatever else?
Yeah. I've always hankered. I always wanted to write science fiction, and I have a couple science fiction projects I'm working on, and I hope to complete, and I hope that can find favor in the eyes of publishing.
How would you describe the difference between fiction and science fantasy? Science fiction and fantasy.
Fantasy. Fantasy and science fantasy, perhaps?
Yeah. Science, yeah. All right. Yeah.
Yeah. For me, Star Wars is just fantasy. It has the thinnest connection to science fiction, just because it's in space, I suppose.
Yeah. So I guess I just mean between science fiction and fantasy. Do you conceptualize a difference there? Do you make a difference? How do you view kind of the blur of these genres that are so often
Yeah.
put on the same
I,
shelf.
I don't like the blurring. I think it has to be based in science or not, and for it to be science fiction.
Interesting.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
can
I'm just always
speculate.
curious.
You can speculate. You can play with ideas, but they have to come back to be rooted in some sort of current realism, I think.
Do you watch any of that stuff like on YouTube or anything, like the crazy science? Because I you talked earlier about just philosophy and stuff like that, but like when you go hardcore into like particle physics and all of that and these like double slit experiments, or it kind of does get back to as hardcore as the science gets, then at some point it becomes philosophical again. Are you into that kind of stuff, or?
Not the hard science like physics, but more biology and environmentalism, ecological thinking, and evolution. Yeah.
Very cool.
I mean, I think there's something. I mean, science is about communing with the unknown in a way. So, I mean, it's about exploring the world. So,
Sure.
Yeah.
You can do that in a number of ways.
Of course.
Yeah.
And what draws you more to like is it just spending time in nature that your ecology biology type of has that more of a draw?
I don't know. Maybe it's just I feel I can tell the stories there are more compelling to me. I don't know. They draw me more. And also, of course, the time, the things that we're facing. That there is an existential threat right there that is looming and is deserving of attention.
You feel that more because you're in Alaska too, so you're like kind of on the front lines of a lot of the crazy stuff. That's just like environmentally, at least I see the YouTubes of all these glaciers tumbling down and all that.
Some of it, yes. I mean, but of course, there's just people who can interpret that in any way they wish, unfortunately.
We're in a crazy time.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that's one of those things when you talk about the crisis our environments in. I mean, that is such a wide-ranging effect, and I mean, it's even outside. I mean, so much of the U.S. has wildfires all the time, the worst wildfires there's ever been. I mean, this is going to have huge effects everywhere. So, I mean, definitely Alaska's having problems too, I'm sure. So, unfortunately.
Yeah. So the science fiction that's interesting me right now would be dealing with those sort of issues.
Yeah, I feel like actually a lot of contemporary speculative fiction is starting to grapple with that, or when you're talking about imagining the future, a lot of them deal with climate crisis stuff, because I think and I actually talked to Steve about this when I talked to him for God Is Not Willing, which obviously has that vein of talking about climate. I just think it's, it's on people's mind, and whatever's going on in authors' lives kind of end up getting reflected in their work. So I think it's kind of natural that you end up seeing it in that.
That's true.
Have either of you guys read The Tough Voyaging, the George R.R. Martin? Tough, I forget what his last name is, but he's kind of like it's a science fiction thing, but it deals with all kinds of philosophy and stuff, and he goes around, he has this like arc ship, and he can make biological stuff from his computer records that they have of all these things, and but it's like grappling with the same kinds of problems that people have here in overpopulation. It's a great thing, and just kind of reminded me of that one.
Oh no, I haven't read that.
Have you considered doing a George R. R. Martin and maybe just ghosting this series to just go work on some other stuff,
Is that a request?
I'm just saying, you could think about it. I mean, it seems like he's owning a movie theater, writing comics, having a great time, So it seems like, could be stress free. Go work on some other projects,
True enough. Yeah.
Think about it.
It's all a life journey.
Very cool.
He's doing his own thing, huh? And I suppose you could say, well, he's earned it, and
100%.
Yeah, I'm mostly joking. Honestly, I feel like he wrote 5 great books, and he wrote some other good, interesting stuff too. If he wants to go do that, God bless him. That's
if he's maybe got the writing bug out of his system. I don't know, but if you do, you go and do something else.
No, whatever. He's another human. I gotta respect that, you know.
And I'm still enjoying it, and still, so I only do it as long as I personally enjoy what's appearing on the page, and into it, and laughing or crying with it.
Yeah, so that brings me to a question I had. When you get to the end of this list of stuff, so to speak, you and Steve split up. Like, do you think you'll move on, or do you think, have you reached the end of that list? Would you move on to some of this science fiction stuff? Like,
Yeah, I think so. There's more stories to tell. After this series, I don't know. I don't really see much more unless we put our heads together and decide we have to do X or Y. Probably be something else, another project.
Interesting. So you would think maybe after this Path to the Ascendancy wraps up, you'd look elsewhere.
Yeah, I think so. Unless people are saying, well, there's so much more to do up in the north of Ganabagas or whatever, and
sure,
which is true, but it would have to be a very compelling story.
Interesting. That also feels like news in a way, you know?
Yeah. And you'll have 12 big books too, so it'll be perfect. I don't know where I'm gonna squeeze them in, but we're gonna figure it out.
Yeah, well, 12 not so big books, but
yeah, nice.
A sale is pretty big. That's a chunker.
A sale is pretty big, yeah.
A sale is pretty big, but this is one of those things. Like, I was reading a book. Just like when the Book of the Fallen books are just so absurdly long. It's like, I don't know. It just kind of twists your point of view, because a sale is maybe as I say. What show it? I
gotta show it just for the people who
didn't see it
on the last podcast. This is why we want the reprint. That is an epic. That's what you want on your bookshelf. Such a sweet cover.
I just love good old fashioned fantasy art. I know it's like, it's all driven by publishing and what sells, but the modern fantasy art style, I'm just like, the 70s, 80s of like just weird dudes on stuff is way more, I don't know. There's something campy and charming I find about it,
And just such a killer, critical, awesome moment. Burry,
for sure.
Blue guy. Oh.
Well, you're talking to someone who may have gotten into it just because of the Frazetta covers. I mean,
100%.
I'm just a Frazetta fan. I really love his stuff.
One of my favorite.
Go ahead. When I saw it on those covers, it was just magnificent, and I think those are just great, evocative covers, and not just of say an event that occurs in the book, but more of the ethos and the spirit of what's the author's trying to get across.
No, and just like a sense of, I don't know, sense of adventure and fantasy. It's like that's kind of what's being sold in a sense, and that's what I love.
Yeah. When you're just walking by.
I think Steve and I have been very lucky. I think overall, I think we've got really. We're both very pleased with our covers, and especially me. I'm very happy with them. I think they're great. So I've been very lucky, I think, in my cover art.
I don't know if you ever do this, but there's like a lot of just fan art for Malazan stuff, and I highly recommend really just Googling that, because there's so much like epic fan art from a lot of really, really talented people.
I don't, and maybe I should, but I'm also worried about being influenced a little bit.
I get that.
Yeah. So it's like, well, for now, I won't go there.
Yeah.
Understand.
I do get that, because I'm sure in your mind you have a version of these things that maybe is best left in a glass box in the under the cupboard.
Yeah, and and it's shared maybe by a lot of things. Maybe it's similar to other things, but that's because it comes out of my life experience, and so other people share that experience. Growing up and reading the same fantasy series I read, and
the Orb Scepter Throne PS Publishing cover too. That's the one I'm hunting for on eBay, because it's just absolutely insane off the
hook. Speaking of reading fantasy growing up, what type of, who would you cite as the big influences for you when it comes to writing this type of stuff?
Growing up, when I was younger, I think come clean in my deep readership in Moorcock. um, but really, I think the biggest name for me would be Howard. I'm a big Howard fan, and still am. His work has been sort of diluted by later editing, and sort of some very questionable things were done to his work by later hands. But if you ignore all that and try and get to the original stories before they've been messed with and watered down and changed, there's a lot of power there.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, we got to hook you up with Raph. Raph's a big Howard fan.
And Fritz Lieber, the Tales of Fafhrd and the Grey Mouse are just wonderful for there's that humor component right there coming through. And again, a duo, a wonderful duo. Fafhrd and the Grey Mouse.
What do you mean watering down? I'm very curious. I mean, I haven't read much Howard, but I'm just curious on this, like, I guess, little subject,
Oh, yeah. Well, it's very nasty. I mean, there's a couple of later authors decided that they could posthumously abridge and edit his work, and they sort of took that and made up in whole stories out of cloth, and marketed them as Howard stories done by them. And so it became difficult to sort of sort out whose voice you were listening to when you were reading this broader body of Haborian work.
Interesting.
Shame.
Did you ever read any of that, Iskar?
No. I came into reading very late in life. I was like very much spreadsheet focused, and like I didn't have a grasp of what I was missing out on, and so I was a late bloomer when it came to
late bloomer and into fantasy, late comer.
Yeah. Although I always liked comic books and Greek mythology as like a little kid, so it seems like a natural fit. But for some reason, I kind of drank the Kool-Aid that like you should be like economically focused instead of not wasting time reading for enjoyment.
Yeah, well, those were my sort of teenage stuff, and then when I met Steve, I had come into Cook as well, Glenn Cook's work, and I handed him The White Rose, or the first of the series, The Black Company, I think. And then he handed me, I think he did, Tim Cook's Drawing of the Dark. And so we just sort of mutually sort of established our aesthetic by that cross-fertilization right there. And those two books are very foundational, I think, to the Malazan.
Yeah, man, I think there's a really powerful connection you can share when you are sharing stories, books, movies, whatever it is you love with someone. I think there's a way you can communicate through both understanding or kind of having the same experience through a novel or something that, like, I don't know. Obviously, I feel like novels can express ideas that you can't say in a single sentence, right? That's kind of the whole point in a sense. And like, I think, I don't know, there's something powerful there.
Sure. And we just happened to click on that, and everything we agreed on so much. So it was, it was wonderful to find someone who felt the same way about the genre. And we could compare readings and talk about what we loved about the genre and what spoke to us in it, and what both of us wanted to be writers, and we talked about what we wanted to do with it. And that was sort of the beginning.
So cool. Yeah,
it's
that's
always
why I started
awesome.
a YouTube channel, man. I wanted to like talk to someone about these amazing Malazan books that I couldn't talk anyone into like reading, because they were like, oh, it's too big. So I totally vibe with that. It's just like, it makes it something to have a book club.
Well, here you are with your channel and a community, and that's just wonderful. I think that's great. This online community sharing love. That's fantastic.
Yeah, it's always awesome when you connect with someone over a book, and then you can, especially I feel like in fantasy books, when you're like so often like scrolled away in your room reading a super long book about a made up place, And then you're like, walk outside and everyone's doing other stuff with their day. And you're like, I was just in a whole other and then when you can connect with someone about it, there's a huge catharsis. So I totally, vibe. I am curious though. So you're connecting with Steve, you're talking about things you like about these books and maybe the genre in general. Was there stuff you clashed about, stuff you disagreed about, and like values you didn't share that were in conflict, so to speak?
Very little. We were in great agreement mostly on the foundational philosophies and themes, and very little clash about things. I don't know if he remembers, but there was one thing that we did really clash over in a screenplay. And it was, he wanted to have it. We were on the mercenaries, Black Dog Blues. It was, and so we were with the sappers on the river crossing, and he wanted to have I think a hand sort of come up out of the water with a sword, and they miss it. They don't they don't see it. They go right by it, or something like that. And I thought, no, I don't. That's too Arthurian. I don't want to import any of the Arthurian ethos into the world. I thought that was too much of a wide door. And he said, no, it's just a little one-off, just a joke. Like he just throws in these little things all the time. But that one, I said, I don't like that one. And so we just went back and forth for some time on that. That's about the only sort of real major thing I can think of as far as a disagreement goes.
Nice.
It's not surprising though. I feel like Steve often has like one-off gags that are just like, and then out,
Yeah,
so.
Yeah, he has these gags, and but for treatment of larger things like characters, I've always just loved what he's done with mine, and then I picked one up one of his, and he has he's like just waiting. He says, I want to see what you do with this character and take them in a whole different direction from the one from before, and I'm trying to surprise him actually, with it, and vice versa.
Now, has there ever been a time where Steve's like, you do something with Lady Envy, you do something with yada yada, and then there's a sense of that you surprised him in like a bad way or in a way that like you feel is discordant, or I'm curious about that.
No, well, not that he's confessed to, or I to him. It's always been very more like, oh, I really like this, I really like that, I really appreciate it, and vice versa. I mean, he really appreciates. I know. Krupp, for example, I can't do his Krupp, I'll do my Krupp.
Sure.
And it's the same in spirit and in character history, but it's not his, it's different, that'll always be the case. But he's never had a problem with my versions of his prior characters, and vice versa.
What about like elaborating? Because like Taishren is not really, you never see Taishren that much on the Book of the Fallen side, and you never get a POV, I guess, of him from you, but you at least I don't know, I feel like there's more. I wouldn't say you make him necessarily likable, but you at least understand him better. He's not just this kind of referred to character and kind of all that complexity. Is it fun to try and take something like that where there's just like a tiny little snippet and then kind of blow it up?
Well, I think it's a great authorial point of view challenge to take a character who is, universally disliked, or who is a very an unlikable person, and then get into them and see why they are the way they are and why they tick that way, and then be able to make them sympathetic to the reader. And that's a real challenge, and if you can pull that off, I think you've really done something amazing, and I would hope to be able to pull that off.
Yeah, no, sympathetic is a great word. Yeah, because it's not like you're like, yeah, I want to go out and get a beer with Taishren after that, but no, you definitely kind of develop that empathy and kind of get to put yourself in that shoe a little bit better and have a greater understanding. So yeah, I think so. That's thank you.
It also feels like an authorial challenge just from knowing that, you know, when someone picks up this book, they've read a few other books and they have some preconceived notion of who Krupp is and the way Krupp's written and like what the feel of that character is. So it feels like it's another thing to be able to balance that expectation and to also have them understand that like this is Krupp, it is the same person, but like it's a kind of different version. And I don't know, it seems like a kind of difficult needle to thread.
Well, it was very intimidating. I mean,
I imagine.
I was very hesitant. And I spoke that to Steve, and he said, "Oh no, don't worry about it. Just go for it." And I knew that some people might not like that, but that's them. You know, if they choose to be that way as readers with blinkers, then they can do that, and that's their choice.
Has there been a character that you've thought about taking on that you didn't because you just thought it wasn't going to be the right choice?
I never considered taking on, say, Animandaris. I never would, and I don't have any need to, but nor would I. I think it's just too much there, too big to step into. So far, no need has arisen, but if it did, then I would, if it was necessary for the story.
But I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
No, I love it.
Iskar, you have any final questions or something?
No, I mean, I feel like we've so monopolized your more than generous time already. I'm like looking through my list. I could talk all day long, obviously, and I have like a million more questions. But no, you've been so generous, and it's been actually just so much fun too. And you've dropped some absolute bombshells that I know everyone's going to be thirsting and salivating over. So.
Yeah, we got the deep lore, or not I don't know, titillating lore earlier, and then this Forge of the High Mage going to be very exciting. So that's going to come out this year. Is that what we're thinking at? Maybe this summer-ish, maybe this fall-ish.
I hope so, but because of the delays it's probably in the back of the queue. So we'll see.
It's on its way.
No date assigned. No date assigned.
No, I can't speak to that.
Interesting.
But we can go harass Bantam and Tor.
Get on it, people. Keyboard warriors unite. Let's go.
Give me a date.
Yeah.
Well, it's just one of those things, like I just feel like every few months someone's like, there's a random date on Amazon. It's like confirmed. And I'm like, I don't know, guys. I feel like this is,
it can change. Yeah, wishful thinking. They'll do what they want there and stick it on.
This is going to be good. We're excited.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for coming on the show today. We really appreciate it.
It's been great. Thank you for inviting me, and I just love the chance to talk about Malaz and the books, of course. And it's great to talk with you guys. I've been watching your videos and really enjoying your work, and I really appreciate it. Thank you.
No, so much fun. Really enjoyed it. And honestly, I've watched all your interviews, and I think this one's just an extra edition. Everyone's going to be so pumped, and I can't wait to just watch it as a viewer, because you rocked it, and it was absolutely so much fun. And thanks to Pete for setting it up.
No, I'm glad that the podcast could have this mini series talk about these 6 books, and then be able to talk to him is a treat. So, all right, well, that'll be all for us today. Thanks for tuning in. And next week on our podcast, we're talking to Steve about Reaper's Gale. So you can tune into that. And other than that, goodbye. All right. Don't leave. One time I said goodbye, and then Steve left the literal.